This is a reply to a question I had posed to me in the comments about these injector pumps again, and especially how to get this solenoid off the Bosch VE pump. It is tricky. There isn't much access. You can't put a socket down onto it. You can't really get a spanner into there. Now this is actually 24mm AF across the flats. Not many people have got a 24mm spanner. So what do we do when we're stuck? Well, we've got to make something. Now I don't know about you, but when I was a young mechanic, I kept all my old tools. I never threw anything out, because when we got guys here working, they usually lose stuff. But sometimes you want to upgrade on spanners. So if you're a budding mechanic and you want to start doing this type of thing, don't go out and get yourself into debt and buying snap-on spanners and stuff like that. Just buy cheap stuff. And then when you earn a bit of money, when you're good at what you're doing, then put your old ones aside and upgrade them with something a bit better. You know, I mean, there's nothing worse than getting into debt when you're a young man. So what do? Well, we keep all these old spanners to make things. Now this is a little selection of, I've got loads and loads of others, but I'll just pull these out of one drawer. When I used to do SU carburetors on British cars, you couldn't get the damn things off, you couldn't get a spanner in. So, you know, it meant cutting spanners and down and bending them, you know, just to get that little bit on. Instead of going out and buying a special key, you know, to get it off, well, just sort of warm them and bend them. There's nothing wrong. And all these are sort of made in India and places like that, you know, like really cheap stuff. So don't be worried. They are getting a second life. So what I did for this one, because I did have a spanner and I lost it, I actually ground down a 3/4 inch Indian spanner. Nothing against the Indians, mind, but there's no great torque involved in these solenoids. There's nothing really tight. It's sitting on an O-ring at the bottom. It's just the access is really bad. So like I say, I just ground down a 3/4 spanner just to show you. I just picked one out there and put it in the grinder, you know, ground it up, and away she goes. Handy to have a sort of a micrometer type thing. These are really cheap, so and they're not too bad for accuracy. I mean, we're not in a machine shop making nuclear equipment. So first of all, to get it off, you need a 5/8 or an 8mm spanner, and 5/8, 8mm is about the same. So first of all, you're going to have to take off the electrical connection, I'm afraid. All will become clear. Because if you don't, you can't get the actual switch out. It's a real bad idea, you know. I don't know why they came up with that, you know, such a big switch in such a small place. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm talking about. There's the connection on the top there. Now it's going to be tricky if you're working in situ on your Land Rover to get this off, but honestly there's no other way of doing it. So what I suggest, if I was you, because these are really cheap, you know, well, these parts are cheap, go and get yourself a handful of these little nuts here. You know, you can, what are they, about 5mm. You can pick them up for next to nothing. I buy a box of them for about $2 or $3. Now you can take your electrical connection off. Why I'm saying buy the new nuts, because if you're working outside like I do a lot of the time, and if you're working in the dirt, once that nut's gone, well, now what are you going to do? You can always take one off somewhere else, I suppose. But they're so cheap. Get some ducats and, you know, and keep a few bits and pieces handy. Spanner. So now we've got that off, we can now put our world famous spanner on. It is world famous now. Now I'm going to actually cut the head off this, just so I can put, maybe if it is really tight, I could put a little extension on it. I could bring two spanners together, but there you go. So I'm just going to give this a little tap. should have done it in a vise, but you can see now that is just sort of finger tight. And then you can get into here and get this off. It is so close. There you go. There, she's off. Now, don't forget, inside there is a plunger. I bet the damn thing won't come out for me. Ah, there we go. Don't forget this plunger. And also, don't lose the spring inside here. What happens is, oh look, and there's the O-ring, look, see? The O-ring's, well, it's not very O anymore, it's more like a C rather than an O. But don't lose the spring, you know, just be careful when you're taking these out. And what's supposed to happen if you want to test these, put this bit to ground and put 12 volts through this end, and that plunger should operate. So when you put your ignition on, this pulls up and it lets fuel into the pump. When you turn your car off, this pops out, shuts down, shuts the fuel off, your car stops. Very, very simple. Not much really goes wrong with them, but they do go wrong. And they're not cheap. They're not a cheap little thing, because you can only get them from Bosch. So that's that. So what else do you need to know about? Not much really. Just trying to clean around this area first. Let's see if I can get down here a bit. That's a bit better, isn't it? Clean out this area before, because once you get dirt into these injector pumps, it's so easy to do with the Land Rovers. So if you've got access to an airline or one of those little, you know, air gun things, you know, you get for cleaning out your computer, blow around it before you take this piece out, you know, because getting dirt in there is game over. Now, just before I go, one quick tip. Sometimes I've known if these do break and you can't start your car, an old tip we used to do, just temporarily, just to get you going, was to remove this plunger from the solenoid and then put the solenoid back on, and you could actually start your car. If this was suspect and even when you had your ignition on and you had power coming to this switch and it wasn't opening, take the switch off, take the plunger out, put the switch back in, but you've got to stall it to stop. It's a bit of a bummer, but it will keep you going. And that's the most important thing. You want to keep on the road or off the road or whichever way you want to be, but you don't want to be parked up and disabled. So that's a little quick tip. I'm sure every mechanic knows that, but there's always one or two people who don't. So I hope that was helpful, and yeah, so putting it back in is exactly the same way. I'm not going to waste time doing that, but that's how to get it out. Just get your spanner, cut it down, and then you can put it back in again just the same, and just a little tap to tighten it up. It doesn't need to have a great big 12-inch extension on there just to wind it down. So we'll talk to you later.